Welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. We're still in September and we're paying tribute to World Suicide Prevention Day, and also Recovery Month. In the United States, since 2018, it increased exponentially for 37% of suicide rate. But now, currently, some of the countries with the highest rate are Guyana and South Korea. I'm half South Korean, so it kind of speaks a little volumes when you think of that. And in the United States, also, just last year, 105,000 people have died from overdose in the U.S. itself. The data can be overwhelming. It fluctuates. So a lot of times, it may go down a percentage, but, people are still, it's still a reminder of how important this topic is. I do want to mention that last month we talked about connect our communities, and we paid tribute on, and I think our communities really play a big role in some of when we think about one more day. I just want to mention this before bringing our returning guest. September 10th was World Suicide Prevention Day, and their theme was creating hope through action. And I thought that was intriguing, looking at that theme of as we try. There's so many cultures when we think about the world and how they perceive suicide. So I do find it encouraging that we're actually talking about it. Again, we have a returning guest, Grace. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insight and just being a part of the conversation.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to be here again in a different phase of my life.
No worries. I just want to say disclaimer for those who are listening, watching. If you're in crisis, at least in the U.S., it's 988. No, in wherever you're at, I do encourage you to find what resources, what is available. I just kind of go with the idea. If the environment is a place that you can ask for help, that's a good environment you need to be. So if you're unable to say, I need help, I do encourage you to find an environment that you can do that, whether it's a group of friends, whatever it is. Because none of us are sometimes prepared as friends or family members to kind of help or even know what to do. But if you know that you could ask for help, that's, I feel, is one of the most important things. I always say, people say better than I do, and you reminded me before we started that I used this quote last time, but Robin Williams speaks near and dear to me, and I'm just gonna bring it out just to flush out and also just kind of spark us thinking about this day. Robin Williams says, I used to think the worst things in life was to end up alone. It's not. The worst thing in life is to end up with people who make you feel alone. What comes to mind when you hear this again? Grace?
No, it's a great sentiment, like you said, to reflect on, as well, as we know that Robin Williams suffered from depression for a long time, which is also crazy to think that he could cover it up so well from his demeanor and character that he always played. But this time, this quote brought something different to mind, and it was actually the opposite of being alone, but actually having that kind of factor of solitude in it. From Henry David Thoreau, the naturalist and philosopher. I never found the companion that was so companionable as solitude. And I feel like, obviously, when you're in that aloneness, loneliness, whatever we want to target it as, it's hard to find that sweet solitude moment. But knowing that there is hope in the fact that we could change that loneliness into a sweet, fine moment of being alone and being still within yourself. I think that is what helped me from the last time we spoke, when I was coming out, let's say, or even during that time of my depression, to now thinking that I enjoy being alone again. Not the loneliness, but the solitude,
Yeah. I think the verbiage is, I do like that you bring that up, because it's not, at least when I look at this quote again, it's urgency. Robin Williams is accounting. I need to be around people to get something I don't have. And it's interesting when you find out that some of the battles, at least the hardest battles, the hardest conversations you have with the internal ones, the ones you have with yourself. The
That's
idea,
true.
because the idea of being alone is not bad. Is not necessarily negative. It's how we look upon it. We could be alone and find a lot of healing, find a lot of peace by being alone, being still, as opposed to.
Yeah.
But what Robin Williams also accounts, also reading this is, I guess the common, sometimes we're kind of superficial how we think of things. I'll just surround myself with a lot of people, and I'll be okay.
Yeah, to cover it up.
And we think because the numbers are greater that we're more connected, and I don't agree with that. Especially now, we don't communicate well. First off, and the other thing that I was speaking to one of my colleagues, but also just recently, just the idea that we take a lot of prep and patience, and we're very intentional. If someone is blind or unable to speak or whatever, what's one of the first priorities for them to communicate with the world? What we're so lax today of how we use our communications when we're able to. There's Braille, there's sign language, there's all these things if someone's born with the inability to communicate like we do. Like I'm speaking to you, you hear me, that kind of thing. There's that necessity and that drive to communicate, yet that kind of has deteriorated how we see it as a need. So I'm talking to you, we're having this conversation. Robin Williams, in this quote, I'm like, I can imagine him being around a lot of people, but having the same superficial talks you have every day. The idea, oh, how you doing? I'm busy. Oh, you're busy. That's great. How's everything? Great. There's no depth in there. And sometimes I feel then what Robin Williams is saying, it does make sense, because you're trying to solve a problem that's not the same problem that you're having, really, in the regards to loneliness, versus I'm content by being alone because I'm able to, be at peace, be okay with my own presence, because I have talked it over in myself. I had those conversations within myself, and that I feel is very important. So, as we were saying, environment, whether it's in a spatial or in yourself, is very important. So they could be in a great house or great environment, but it's also the internal environment. When it comes to environment and what we've been talking, especially with Robin Williams' quote, anything brings when you think of the idea of environment, what comes to mind to you, Grace? Do you feel it's as important? Your environment seems to have changed since last time we spoke. How has that benefited you, and anything you would like to share on that?
Yeah, basically since the last time we spoke, I would say the environment that I found myself in was pushing me to heal, because I was surrounding myself with loved ones, people that cared for me, nature. So I really believe, I'm a firm believer that environment plays a massive role on one's balance in life, and also on your health in general, because what's around you will always give the energy what's within you. And it's the same with the quote with Robin Williams. If you have good people around you, then you have good energy. If you have people that are just going to drain your energy, then of course you're not going to be stable within. But it also goes back to that connection, like fueling connection with your environment gives you meaning. So, when you have a connection, now I live in a new city, I feel way more stable here because it was something new for me. I feel good here. It's not such a big city as I was in Berlin. So many factors around my environment now have shifted towards giving me like more of a stable stillness within. So I really truly believe that it definitely is a part that will change you or not. And obviously it's not so easy to just change your environment, change your friends. But to always remember God is there, nature is there, community is there, all the things that you need are there, like always counting your blessings, I think then configures that stability within from your environment.
Yeah, and I a lot of times there's so much emphasis on improving oneself or being successful, but I think some of the most successful people we will never know because it's subjective. It's subjective.
Yeah.
You can be successful in a cabin in the woods and be happy, just there. You can
Like
be
Henry David Thoreau.
Yeah, exactly. You can be happy. More doesn't mean more. A lot of times right now in society, it's driven by convenience. We're almost giving up our ability to think of what we actually want, and that can prove to be problematic because maybe more isn't more. Maybe I do my best work. Funny enough, a lot of times people, grinding whenever you're doing. I do my best work when I slow down. Honestly, when I'm able to slow down, because and it's hard for me to slow down at times. But then I'm realizing this concept that we're all kind of incomplete, really, in life. Where there's never like, oh, I've made it. You're just kind of you're this journey, perpetual. But that I think the acceptance, at least for me, has been helpful. The idea that my life is incomplete in the sense of completion, as people may say, and things may add to it, things may take away from it, but I think the idea is that it's okay that it's incomplete. That gives more pliability of what you may need to adjust. The idea is not, oh, only if I get this degree, only if I get this job, only if I meet this people, only if I get this status. All that stuff is just they don't necessarily last, and maybe a lot of times these pressures sometimes may actually avoid the actual missing part. Like the idea of being alone is frightening for others, and I understand that, but there's other people like you're mentioning, like myself. I do enjoy my alone time. I enjoy being creative. I enjoy being able to just be still, be with myself. And I feel sometimes in Hindi, there's this word called jugad. It's ensuring that things happen even with minimal resources. It's untranslatable words, but sometimes, like I say, we think we need to add things in our lives. A lot of times, we need to add this. We need to improve on that. Sometimes we need less. Sometimes less is more when we actually think of things of that matter.
I agree fully to that. Finding joy in the little things is what matters the most, and not our consumerist society or, like you said, self-obsessed society of always wanting to do more, complete more, be more. What if you're enough as you are? You are, actually. You have to always remind yourself that I am enough as I am right now. And if that's the way you also do it, with kind of thinking that that's incomplete, that also gives you more engagement to be engaged with your life.
Yeah.
But take away the pressure, because you're not incomplete. You're complete the way you are. You're enough as you are.
I guess I'm not incomplete. I would say unfinished. Let's just try that. Unfinished. We're always kind of unfinished.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Always traveling on through life.
Yeah, I feel incomplete is a little bit negative, but I would say unfinished is a more appropriate, because there's always this destination kind of mind. Like, if I get to this point, but everything, life is in between those things we plan. Like they say, the things we make plans, all the things in between is life. So I feel understanding that, I think is very helpful. I can't say this word. It's Dutch. I'm not going to brutalize it, but a lot of us do this, is ostrich politics, acting like you don't notice that something bad happens and continue on regardless, as you normally would. How many of us do this? It's a huge word. I'm not going to insult the Dutch, but trying to say
Politik.
Thank you.
Maybe.
but I think a lot of us put our heads in the sand. A lot of times, especially those who are struggling, we're paying tribute to not making light, but those families affected. There's a ripple effect if someone chooses to end their life. Like the numbers say in the beginning of this episode, just the idea that um, the numbers not going down, and when people start putting so much emphasis on the numbers when we think about suicide prevention, I feel you miss the point. I think in May I had the theme this year was remembering our names, because the thing is, one thing about diagnosis is, and I work in the mental health field, is it doesn't precede the person's name. So if I have, let's say I have bipolar, right? I'm not bipolar Robert. I'm just Robert. Bipolar is the
Yeah.
diagnosis they have. For me, it may help gear or guide the treatment that may be appropriate, but it doesn't define me. We never say I'm diabetes. Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? I'm not. Even with cancer, we're a lot more forgiving. But if I have bipolar, if I have schizoaffective, if I have schizophrenia, then my name goes away. Then my value goes away. And a lot of times, when we talk about suicide, there's sometimes dual diagnosis. That's why Recovery Month, people who have substance use issues, not to minimize that, a lot of times, biggest complaint is they don't feel heard. So they don't feel like they can connect, as we talk about connections and stuff like that. And I feel, part of that also. Bringing this one African proverb, which I love this. It's kind of nice because it kind of grounds us as humans. Because if you want to go
Mhm.
quickly, go alone. Everything's about quick and fast. But if you want to go far, go together. So
Yeah, that's so nice.
it shows what sometimes the importance of community, whatever it is. It could be one or two people. Maybe you guys just go out, do your hobbies, whatever it is. A community is just people that you connect with, that you can depend on. And the environment doesn't have to be vast. It doesn't have to be this big thing. But if I feel since I think that since the turn of the century with the Industrial Revolution, when cities became bigger, we had more people populated in the same area, and our communication became less with factories and people working in factories, working harder with less time to, and all that. It kind of really disrupted community. It could be before there were communities around all over the world that were a little bit more connected than they were before the Industrial Revolution. But that's just a little tidbit I wanted to share. But anyway, when it comes to with this African proverb, anything you want to comment? Anything that we've said? I don't want to. Anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, what you just said kind of sparked a thought in me, though. Although obviously times have changed, I would say that we have to also see social media as a positive. I mean, without social media or whatever, we wouldn't have connected right now.
Yeah.
And if there aren't people physically around you, I know it can be very hard and you can feel lonely as ever. But just remember, also online, you can feel connected through people that are going through similar things as you. Finding community online is a really great way to find meaning again. And, obviously there is negative and positive sides of social media, but I do want to just encourage that again, because I know it's not possible for everyone in the world to just have great people around them, and like we're saying, this community, this environment. But online communities, I know through also women that feel the similar, let's say, effects of period have come together and just find hope in a similar trouble, let's say, or people that are going through, like you said, these labels of mental health disorders. You can find people online that are also going through the same thing as you and are maybe using their mental health disorder to create art. For example, I've seen that on Instagram a lot, and who are very open about how they're feeling, and then you can feel safe enough to share the way you're feeling and then feel that community vibe. So just want to say that for the people out there that maybe don't have family and friends around physically to support them, because you can find refuge also online when you want to.
Yes, and I do feel that it's important to know I guess when I brought up the know our context, because history repeats itself. There is definitely technology today that I couldn't imagine not having an AC. So
really
during this last summer,
I couldn't imagine having it.
in Florida, it's so
is
that's
it hot?
It's really hot. So so some parts of the country, you can imagine certain technologies we are blessed to have. Depend on where our infrastructure depends on it. And like you mentioned, social media, obviously there's with anything, there's always a negative side to it. There's definitely people who abuse it, people who don't do it in a way that is helpful, but at the same time, like we said in the beginning, like the internal conversations you have in the sense of putting barriers is important. Knowing people you can trust and being able to say no, if things are not going well. Because the thing is, I tell people with the internet, it's just like when you walk out the door. Like, you're not going to, if someone says, "Hey, I'm your friend," and you don't know them, they're not your friend. You treat it like if you were in the spatial environment in the physical world. If you do that most times, you do a little bit better. But if and obviously be mindful of that. Unfortunately, with anything, there's also negative, but there is also a lot of positive, like you bring up. There's people, like, we couldn't connect if there was never social media. If there's no video, there's no technology. So I think there's a great opportunity that I thought was interesting when you mentioned it, because it is a great opportunity, because we get to talk to people around the world who have different experiences, different experiences to the topic we're talking about. And I feel, in a way, even though we're not physically proximately very close to each other, we can feel very connected and close. And I feel that's the one thing that technology has that advantage of. And I think it really just starts with the person. The idea is, how do you feel about yourself? If how you feel about your value, and making sure that you take steps if you need help. It's not all or not. If things are troubling you, ask for help. But like you said, I think there's always the two sides of the coin. So I do appreciate you mentioning that.
You just have to be cautious and know what you're looking for, if you know what I mean. Just obviously being vulnerable, I feel like these days, like me and you are speaking about it now, like, is way more accepted, I think, through social media. Like, saying what you feel, you know what I mean? I think we need to drive more that conversation of saying how you feel, because if you're not going to do it, who is? I mean, that was kind of why I wrote my book in the end as well. Like, people that just don't feel heard in that sense. And interestingly enough, you even said just before, that's what most people say, that they don't feel heard, they don't feel connected. It's right at your fingertips. Just do it with awareness and cautiousness, and you can find people that are in similar situations to you and make yourselves feel better together.
And you mentioned art, and a lot of times I feel like it's very cathartic to find a creative outlet when you're going through whatever you're going through. So and I feel like we're talking about communication. It's your way of communicating what you're going through. And so I love music. I love other modes of art, and I feel when I think about that, I think a lot about that opportunity of way to connect. How do you feel connected? Well, you could feel connected by expressing yourself through art of what you may be going through. And I think that's it can be very cathartic and healing for an individual, because it's kind of, if you call someone, you tell them, what you're going through. It can be helpful if there's someone you trust, but there's always there's a level of, they won't get what you're really going through, and that's okay. There's a barrier. There's a line. They'll at the same time, I don't. It's kind of unrealistic or expectation to be like, oh, they're gonna understand exactly, and usually that's not really what you want. It really, what you want is
Yeah.
them to be there for you. So, person might be like, I don't know what to do, but I know you like this kind of food, and I brought it over because you haven't been eating. That kind of thing, and that kind of support can be very the tangible. I want to shift gears. It's been good to reconnect, Grace. And I want to shift gears and give you an opportunity to reconnect with those who are listening. Just share what's been going on. And I know you mentioned a little bit, but a little bit about what's going on with Grace today. Like, what's.
That's sweet. Yeah, I mean, I'm firstly, thank you. Very honored that you asked me again, especially for this tribute to Recovery Month and World Suicide Day in general, because I wrote my book, also like you were just saying, through healing, through a journey of grieving my best friend who also died. And it was kind of just like a healing book for me and for others to chill out and cheer up and reconnect with themselves, and also, like you were saying, community and what is around you. So that's really close at my heart, because I feel like, as you said right at the start, the numbers don't ever really decrease. They don't go away. I think this kind of whole season of loneliness is here to stay, unfortunately. But I think the season of this awareness and connection and communication is really being strengthened and forced day by day. So where I am right now compared to where we were when we spoke, was it 2 years ago or 1 year ago?
Well, just over a year ago.
Over a year ago.
Between a year or two ago. It's between that.
Yeah, because I really feel like when we last spoke, I'd just come out of the clinic for mental health reasons, and I was promoting my book mostly then, and now I have recovered, let's say. As you say, life is a journey, still going. Always recovering and healing. But now I feel like I'm in a stage where I'm like really stable and at peace. And that's also what I just want to say to the listeners right now and today. There's always going to be that day where you will be okay again, and you're always on an up and down roller coaster in this life. And if you're feeling the worst of the worst, just to know that maybe there is a glimmer of hope that you will be okay. I think just knowing that is what really got me out of it, and knowing that I can actually use things around me, not like you say, things to consume, but rather things around me like nature, people, art, praying, yoga, all of these factors that I also say in my book. We have to start to look within and with those people around us, and not kind of go on this self-obsessed society. Like, always improving yourself is great, but stop pressuring yourself. My first chapter is actually about pressure because pressure is just everywhere. And we need to, like you said at the beginning, start becoming more slow in things that we do, because they're the times where you do your best work. I remember you said that at the start, like when you just take a moment to become more aware of your surroundings, the present moment of where you are, you start to really listen to your heart and know how you feel. And that's kind of just I wanted to like reiterate on today's episode, because I'm not so sure last time what I was saying, but now I feel like I'm in a more hopeful light. The journey never ends in that sense. Like, you always have up and down days, but just knowing that you do and you can get better every day is I
just want to share, those who are listening, links to find out more about her book will be in the notes, so you'll go check it out. I also want to say, sometimes I guess the best example is like when you learn something when you're elementary or school, and it's cringy when you look back, but the process is important. So a lot of times, the journey of recovery, journey of healing, there's seasons to recovery. So you're doing what better,
Yeah.
Grace, and that's wonderful. Okay, so like
Thank
a lot of
you.
times people are like, oh well, sometimes I guess traditionally working in the mental health field, we might be good at crisis, and then when we get good at stabilization, you know what they're not really good at a lot of times? What's after that? You got
Yeah.
crisis, stabilization. What's next? And then that problem is a little bit more open ended. But not every day is a crisis. Not every day is my everything's falling apart. Some day, like some seasons are where you're at right now. Some seasons are right now you're doing well. You're moving forward, and you're figuring out what's next. You're doing, you're you feel better in the new environment you're in, but we're not supposed to stay. Like hospitals are great for getting healing, especially in urgent situations, getting things addressed medically, mental health wise. But we're not supposed to stay there, and we're not also supposed to stay there in crisis. There's this one quote I just leading into this is John A. Shedd. He said, "A ship is in a harbor is safe, but it's not what a ship is are built for." So the idea is, as ships, a harbor is great. A lot of times, we're struggling. We may need to stay in the harbor for a while, but eventually, ships are not
You have
made
to
for
move
harbors.
on.
You have to
Yeah.
sail away in a way. So,
Yeah, but
but
I feel like our topic of conversation today is definitely, I've thought of the quote a few times, life is a journey, not a destination.
yes,
That is the one.
yeah, and as we kind of reflect, we also know that I think Lao Tzu says that life can be understood backwards, but it must be lived forward. So you're not going to have everything figured out, and that's okay. A lot of
Yeah.
things. Embrace the process. So like sometimes you can
Great
look at yourself
reminder.
5 years ago. I'm like, oh, cringe. Why did I do that? Why was I that way? Don't be. It's all part of you. You're part of that process. So whatever mistakes, whatever you've learned, just remember them, and that's it. You can move on, and
Yeah.
the and I feel that for me is identity, an idea of who you are. I'm Robert. I'm half Korean, half Puerto Rican. Understanding my context really help you ground yourself. Like
Mm.
if we try to take a generic view of, let someone say someone with depression, oh, I'm depressed, and you just kind of kind of say things that normally people say with depression, doesn't help you if you don't think about the context that you're struggling with. So the idea is personalize what you're going through, your care, but don't personalize what externally happens, because usually the things externally, even though it might drive us kind of more anxiety, more like if outside, if like people. I'll give you an example so it's not confusing. If the doctor, because people make human mistakes, if the doctor doesn't call me or the nurse doesn't do something, I don't take it personal that they don't want to help me. That's external. That's out of my hands. I could resolve it. I could go to another practitioner if the person doesn't. But don't take it personal. But if something, the medicines or the treatment's not working, get a second opinion. That's something that you can value. Those are things that you can control. So in regards to your own care and moving forward, it's good to. I find it helpful to personalize and what the context around you. In Korean, it's nunchi. Nunchi in Korean means understand the context, reading the room real well, reading yourself real well. So if I think for me, when it comes to understanding backwards, that's good, but you have to end up moving forwards. I want to ask you something. I know we got all over the place, but I want to ask you, what do you think society can understand as we navigate forward regarding recovery? It's a big question, so I want to take some time on this as we're heading towards kind of wrapping up this episode. But what do you think society can understand as we navigate forward in regarding recovery? What have you seen or experienced that has worked? So I know your experience last time we spoke is very different from how you feel today. Looking around you, what you own experience, what you've seen with your friends, what do you think has worked, when it hasn't worked, when it comes to society and how we respond or how we navigate through our recovery, in your opinion?
Yeah, that is quite a hefty question. But when we just take this, like, let's say, labeling again, this self-obsessed society that we come from, and also in the States where you are quite a consumerist society, I think we have to mostly, but like we firstly understand that society is driving us to be something that we really aren't.
Yeah.
Which is, like you said at the beginning, people that are just constantly working, consuming all the time without a rest. There's no really like second that society kind of gives us to just like, well, except for Corona, when we just like, you know, laid back and had time to reflect. But I think as we navigate forward in our personal recovery, dismiss what society in a way has to say, like those pressures, those regrets that you just mentioned before of the past. Also navigating that your older self is, like you said as well, proud of you right now. That's how I always try and think. And also, I wouldn't be me right now if I hadn't lived what I'd been through.
Exactly.
Sometimes it's horrible for me to even think like, oh, can't believe I was like in the mental clinic, and it's quite a grappling, like, no, I wouldn't say daily concern, but like sometimes that comes up and I just think, oh, what a waste of time, or not really a waste of time, but why did I have to go through that? Or we question like, why did that happen? Instead, making peace with it and being like, actually reframing our mind and thinking, well, if I hadn't gone through that, I wouldn't be here today, or I wouldn't be me. That's the way that I'm trying to make peace with it, because I don't think society gives us that. I think it always kind of makes us think, oh, my body is horrible. I need to change myself. I need to go to the gym. I need to do this. I need to go on a diet to make my physical appearance look good, but rather concentrate on what your non-physical appearance is. Like, what's on the inside?
No, I
obviously
get it.
both, but like, you know, going away from that.
Yeah, it's kind of, you know, the idea is it more important to seem healthy or actually be healthy? It's, you know, one thing, especially working in the mental health field, that I see is that, you know, there'll be family members, this is an illustration, that want to help, you know.
Okay.
But their lenses, not that they don't want to help, but their lenses are different because they're using the context and perceptions from their angle. They want to help their son and daughter. Yeah. But at the end of the day, what is better for John? What is better for Abby? Whoever that person is, may be vastly different. One of the most striking, I guess, illustrations I can give you is the whole family wants to, you know, the person needs to get his own place or her own place, right?
Okay.
And this is just an illustration, just a thought exercise. The whole family's like, oh, you know, we got to get him or her. They never ask the individual. They never ask the individual because the individual says, I'm just going to be miserable in a different place. And from their perspective, they're like, all I feel is that your guys are just shifting me away because I'm inconvenient. And, you know, helping people and not knowing what to say is one thing, but including the person in their own treatment and in their own life, especially in some cases, it can be very damaging to the stigma. So stigma sometimes is accidental. Okay, it's not that the family or the culture that they actually are trying to, but they're like, oh, I think from my vantage point that the person will be happier with their own stuff, but the person themselves is already miserable already. So if they went somewhere else, they'll just be miserable there. That's just an illustration. So knowing one's own context when it comes to experiences and, you know, reflecting and having that inner talk, and those who are listening, is vital. You know, no one will know what you're thinking. No one will know what's important to you, and taking those steps and saying, you know, it's okay to say no to things. There's enoughness that you're talking about, the idea that we're not enough
Yeah.
until we're this, can be very damaging because there's never time for the individual. When is there ever time for whoever they are? Like, when
Yeah,
is
and
there
you're
to figure out?
always running,
Yeah, they're always running,
running
and
after something.
and a lot of times those things are not very steady or stable because it never really came from them. It came from someone else telling them that they will feel
Yeah.
better or do better if they do this. But at the end of the day, when you get to know yourself again, at least from my own experience and what I've seen, it does better. So your goals are going to be be closer to you because you had those goals yourself. I want to be better in this because I want to be better, not because someone else told me. I
Mm-hmm.
feel it's like I'm not a big cruise person, those people go on cruise, and it's just one thing is because everything's kind of done for you. Like they tell you when to eat, all that stuff in the
Ah,
cruises.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I understand the relaxation part of it, but I feel in life sometimes we do this convenience culture that we are in, that
Mm.
it's kind of has the same kind of model as a cruise. So everything's kind of done for us. And I feel in that regards, to piggyback what you're saying, I feel that can be problematic, but there is still hope. It's just like we said, slowing down and finding time
And
and
participating in your own
participating
life.
in your life, not
Yeah.
letting every other decision be made for you. And
But then again, may I just touch on something you just said? If you're not in the mental state, stability wise, to make your own decisions, because I've also been in that before, then they just think they only want to help you. They only want to make things better. Because then if you start to think, oh, they're just trying to control my life, it's like changing that frame of mind again, then you're obviously going to spite them instead of appreciate them.
yeah,
And I think there are stages in our lives where we aren't really
at that point, yeah,
right.
yeah,
We can't make our own decisions. So in a way, okay, that's good. But I know what you mean. Like that, obviously they're doing it from their perception and not yours.
yeah.
And I do go into that in my book about like the pressures from our parents, specifically family, because they think they know us better than we do, for example, or they put those pressures on us.
Yeah.
But sometimes there are times where you can't really make your own decisions. That's also okay. Like there's
Yeah.
time. Never be rushed by this constant chasing
Yeah.
after something that you don't know
Yeah, and I feel
will
that
bring you
I
happiness.
to bridge that the whole there's a time for crisis, there's a time for stability. I was talking about after that the unknown, when the person's in the unknown, the person's somewhat stable, and the family I'm just as the illustration don't know what he or she will be happy with. He or she never took the time or never thought they could figure out what they'd be happy with. And
Yeah.
it's not in a state of when they're in crisis in the hospital. I do encourage if those people a lot of times may not be able to make their own decisions, and that's great when you're really blessed when you have family members or friends who could be there for you at those crises. But again, a lot of times we do, not to say we do it perfectly, but getting person, as long as you get them stable or crisis, is okay. But the longer bit is what happens afterwards, and
Yeah.
and then the maintaining of that. And I do appreciate you clearing that up, because those who are listening, I know that people are in different stages of recovery. If you're really struggling right now, all I really encourage you to do is know that just find the if you need help, ask for help, whoever that is. Find a way that you can do it. I don't like reinventing the wheel. So if there's someone that you feel comfortable with, if it's someone that a coworker or someone that and you're like, I don't have any family, I have no one. But if there's someone that you feel you could go to, a place that you go to, or a number you call, go on social media, like you mentioned, that you connect to, I encourage you to find some virtual or some physical environment, because sometimes we get to the point, just like you're saying, we can't make decisions. But when we're talking about suicide, tribute to suicide prevention, it's that one more day thing. So sometimes these
Yeah.
crisis things spikes. Is finding that the ability to find something to help me for one more day. We can only control what we can control in any given moment. With that,
Mm-hmm.
I think we spoke a lot. I want to ask you, when it comes to Recovery Month and suicide this year, what would you like people to remember in your own, your own experience? Been there, um, a lot we talked about, but what do you think you want people to remember for 2023 this year, primarily when it comes to?
In terms of where we are in 2023, I think we've all kind of as a society and world been taken through a lot in the past 3 years since Corona. And I think we have to remember now more than anything with digitalization and like we're really, let's say, evolving as a society rapidly, and it's quite scary. I mean, personally, I feel world anxiety every day because of climate change and whatnot. We don't have to go into that.
Yeah.
But do you know what I mean? Like, knowing right now is where you're at and always bringing yourself back to that present moment, that is all that matters. And you may, let's say, in the next 5 years or 10 years, we don't know what there is to come. And like you just mentioned yourself, like taking one day at a time, I think is really sometimes the best advice, especially when you're in such a down phase, and being nice to yourself. Like, just try and be nice to yourself. My friend said to me the year that I was in the mental clinic, treat yourself like a friend. Treat yourself like you treat me, because you would never say these things to me that you say to yourself. And it was one of the best advice I've ever got. Like, such a simple kind of phrase and intention. Like you said before as well, like our internal thoughts are the most things that we go through every day. Like, so just make it nice when you can. And if it's not nice to you, then stop it. I know it's obviously not that easy, but I think that in terms of like recovery and suicide is probably the hardest thing that you have to go through, like just accepting yourself and being nice to yourself. And in our day and age where no one is very nice about anything, you know.
And I think with 2023 for me, I would like people to remember that words matter. What people say matters. So, like, you may not, like our parents, I would say, I have grace for your parents in the sense that they weren't in the same, they don't have the same understanding of mental health or what people are going through. They didn't have to live through that like us. So I have a lot more acceptance of that. At the same time, when you go to the store, when we had COVID, we were masked up. We couldn't really, like, when it was really at the peak, what you say matters. So be kind to each other. Be kind to yourself, like you mentioned. But
And to each
it
other,
goes a long way to be kind.
Does.
Because it doesn't expect anything back, and you'll be amazed how much that would help. And also, I would just say briefly that I'm just going back to the whole one more day thing. Just remember that when it comes to being kind to those around you, to yourself, that if it's overwhelming, I do encourage you to find that person, find that number, and call that number. Go and whatever that may be. And I just want to go and lastly, I want to ask for grace. One more day is the theme of this month, and I love the idea of one more day because a lot of things we can't control in our lives. So, in your perspective, what does this theme mean for you today? One more day, in tribute to Recovery Month and World Suicide Day.
I think it hits me on a personal level, actually, now that you just mentioned it again. Because there was a time in my life where I really did take one more day, day by day. As dark as that sounds, I'm so sure that listeners and people are going through that every day. When you are feeling that way, one more day is a drag, let's say, in the frame of mind that you don't really want to live anymore, hold on to the fact that one day soon in the future, you will be feeling better. Sometimes it didn't help me when I was in that state. Kind of made me feel guilty and worse. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It made me feel like, why don't I have that hope? But in some predicaments, it made me think of what more is still to come, always knowing that you will always find more love, more peace, refuge, communication, connection around you. Anyone, everyone, there is always that light at the end of the tunnel, as cliche as that sounds. And one more day can be either way. One more day is a drag, or one more day in the future and I will be better, and holding on to that for yourself.
Yeah. I think well said. Life is short, that's cliche too, but the reason I say that is Martin Luther King says you don't need to see the whole staircase to take the first step. So sometimes all we gotta do is one step at a time up the stairs, and just remember, like, whatever you do, and it sounds strange for me to say this, just do it. Like, I'm not saying like throw your self-care out the window, but don't get stuck on titles, like, especially with when
labels
labels. People with substance use issues, we didn't mention much on it, but I want to say this real quickly, is that a lot of times those milestones are wonderful. I haven't drank for, or haven't used for 6-7 years, but they don't, like, I encourage those who are listening who may have slipped, who are using, right? Like the 6-7 years are a milestone, but your life matters more. So whatever need to get help, it's traditional that people will fall back, will slide back, but that happens.
Forgiveness.
Forgive yourself, and the idea is moving. Don't get hung up on those milestones, and just get the help you need. I encourage you to do that, and also just to know that those milestones are nice, but your life is more important. So value who you are, yourself, and also one more day. It's just a concept that I think all of us sometimes have to do. And I appreciate you, of course. It's been a while, but any last final thoughts? I know we're gonna put all the information about your book. Anything you want to mention that we spoke about? It doesn't have to be what we just spoke about. But as we wrap up, I do really appreciate you, Grace, taking the time and to come.
I've really enjoyed our conversation, Robert. It's always great to have such open topics of conversation, especially when people are always suffering, unfortunately. But knowing that you can heal, and you're always in the process of healing, as we've both said the whole time, forgiving yourself every day. I'd just like to read a short poem out of my book to kind of summarize this pressure. Remember, your competition isn't anyone but yourself. Your competition is you, your laziness, your haziness, your craziness, your niceness, your eagerness, your diet, your ego, the knowledge you neglect as an effect, the negative behavior you foster and nurture. Give it the heave-ho and let go. The bad thoughts you encourage in your head as you overthink, your lack of creativity and energy that makes you sink. Compete against you and make sure to stay true. You will get through, just be cautious of feeling blue. Manage those weird feelings with meditation, mindfulness, and spark the magic that lies within you.
Thank you so much for coming on, Grace. I think that's I think that's well said. I really appreciate that poem. We appreciate you sharing your insight, and I just want to let everyone know, like I said, everything you need to find more about Revive Ministries on the website, reviveministriesfl.com. And like I said, all the information about Grace and what she's doing with her book and everything, you can find out below in the notes. Again, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for so much for being on, Grace. I'm leaving you with Juliette Lewis. Her quote, she said, "The bravest thing I ever did was continue my life when I wanted to die."